Welcome back, everyone. We hope you're well fed and well rested because it's time for tennis. A whole bunch of tennis. Wimbledon is here. I'm excited. Are you excited, Candace? You look excited.
I am excited. Not just tennis, big tennis. And it might start with a rain delay. Bring your umbrella.
Ugh, the weather's going to be rough. But it's okay, Steve. You'll be inside. It'll be nice and dry where you are, right?
Yeah, it's just cold here, but that's okay. I'm really looking forward to staying up late at night waiting for rain to stop in another part of the world. It'll be great.
Yeah, be careful, folks. If you planned on setting your alarm a little bit early for some tennis, you might not have any when you get up. But we're going to be optimistic. We're going to go through all this. It's going to happen. It's okay. You might just have to wait. But most good things are worth waiting for, right? So let's get started. We'll start with the men here. Steve, are we ready to pull up the first quarter?
We are. I hope. There we go. Let me get rid of that banner out of the way.
Novak Djokovic, our top seed here. Rublev, you can't see him. Up there he is, down there at the bottom. Some interesting names here in the middle, but as I think you probably have heard or have put together yourself if you follow tennis, there really is just one name that stands out. What do you see here, Candace?
I see one name that stands out, unfortunately, with Djokovic. His draw is not the worst. I don't know if I'd say it's easy, but it's definitely can get a heck of a lot worse than what we're going to be seeing here with him. There is some intrigue with a couple others in here, I suppose I would say. I'll be interested to see what someone like Christian Garin can do. He's had some spots of success this season. Doesn't have the worst draw at all. At least he's away from Djokovic for a little bit. We've seen Stefano Travaglia do well in recent times. He's somebody who I could see winning a couple of matches in here. But really, you look at this and you go straight to Djokovic there on the top. There's nobody in there that really scares me with him. And that's maybe the downside of not, obviously they wouldn't have played each other this early, but not having Nadal here is you look through his draw and you're just like, well, if he were to lose, it would take somebody playing their best tennis and him obviously underperforming. And it's tough to bet that way because you need really significant odds, right? You need significant enough odds to know that that person has to play their best tennis and Djokovic has to underperform. And a lot of times that's a difficult number to come by. Going to the bottom portion, though, maybe a little bit more intriguing because you have Djokovic away from it. I'm really intrigued by Sinner's draw. You look there towards that top half of the bottom. You have the likes of Schwartzman in there, who's been fine, but, nothing amazing. Obviously, if anything, he's had a kind of a subpar year. Sinner, right off the bat, has a couple of tricky matches, I suppose. You have Fucsovics there right off the bat, and then potentially, I guess the winner of Hanf and Vasily, I think potentially Yuri Vasily there. But if he can make it through those first two rounds, things would potentially open up for him a little bit. He has had success against Rublev in the past. If you're projecting, that's who he'd wind up playing against. So it'll be interesting to see who comes out from the bottom. I'd love for it to be Sinner, though. At least it would give us, I think, a match between him and Djokovic that could potentially be really fun.
Yeah, it could. Now, I know there is one match that Steve is really excited to see. Mark Polmans is going to play Yen-Sun Liu here in the first round. How excited are you for that, Steve? Do you have it on the calendar already? Have you blocked off time? What are you going to be doing? Any special rituals? Break it down for us.
Look, I've cleared my entire schedule. I have nothing on. I've notified my family and any close relationships that I will be busy for this match and do not disturb. I've got my Mark Polman's cap ready to go, so I'll have that on whilst I cheer. And look, in all honesty, when I was going through with filling out a bracket, there was part of me that almost thought that Polmans could make it through to a fourth round here and face Novak, I think, a little bit later on there, but I'll get to that a little bit later. That's obviously the big match, and then there's this other guy called Novak Djokovic who's also probably, he's one to keep an eye on here. I think he's a good up-and-comer and is looking like he's going to be tough to beat. Look, it's an easy draw, and I think we've said similar about kind of the early part of Novak's Roland Garros run as well, but still found trouble against Mazzetti a few others. So I'll be interested to see how Novak goes off just a couple of doubles matches last week. This will surprise you. This is probably the first time I think in a Grand Slam that I've actually thought Andrei Rublev is a little bit of value. I think in the market. I think I saw some 80-1 a little bit earlier when I was having a look. But you look at his draw, he should be getting to a quarterfinal. I think if he brings a level that's pretty close to what he saw or what we saw from him a couple of weeks ago in Germany. So look, I think he will be there at the start of the second week. And I would rather him play Novak in a quarterfinal than in a semi-final or a final. I think Rublev's one of those pressure players. It can get to him a little bit late. He did make a comment, I think, at the start of the German tournament that it looks like now he can play on hard court and now he can play on clay and now he can play on grass. Now he just needs to learn how to play in finals and Grand Slams and he'll be, a factor at the top of the game. So he's one to kind of keep an eye on. I think I'd love to see him get to Novak, but it's going to be a pretty reasonable draw, I think, through that first patch there, through the early rounds for him. So he should be able to make it through.
Yeah, this does strike me as one of the most straightforward quarters, honestly, in either draw. I think this is a Novak-Rublev quarterfinal. We'll see if Andre can shock the world, but onward Novak-Djokovic goes. That's really kind of how it stands for me, and there really isn't too many other names that stick out. We'll see how Kevin Anderson looks here as he comes back. That might be fun, but again, Sinner will hopefully be good. I'm curious to see how he does on grass. I don't know if his game is perfect for it. His ability to win tiebreakers is going to be huge here. So, but that first match could be a little tricky. But at the end of the day, it's a big build-up to me for Novak versus Andre there in the quarterfinals. Anything else from you guys here on this quarter?
I mean, you two are the Americans on the show, but I'll hype up the American that I think Dennis Kudla can make the third round here. I think he's got a tough first round match there, but Fokina was injured in his last match and didn't look fantastic. I think they're about evens, or that's a coin flip odds against Kudla in that first round. But I think he's a chance of getting through a couple of rounds, which would be good for American tennis.
It would. Actually, I like him in that match too. And Jorge tweets tennis is there in the chat. I know he likes Kudla there quite a bit too. So that's a pretty solid first round play. Sounds like we're ready for the second quarter though. Let's see who Novak might play in the semifinals. Tsitsipas there as the 3 seed at the top. Down at the bottom, we have Roberto Bautista, another American, Opelka. I'm not actually sure I'm as optimistic about his chances. Mr. Demonauer's there, Shapovalov. Steve, what do you see here? Are you optimistic about the Australian? I think we might see a Demonauer-Bautista good quarterfinal here. What do you think?
I'm on Demonauer at 280-1. So it's been nice to see him find some form over the weekend, winning that title. It's far more open, obviously, this quarter. And you look at it, Bautista hasn't set the world on fire. Tricky first match against John Millman as well over best of 5. And Tsitsipas we haven't seen since Roland Garros as well. So obviously, he lost that from 2 sets up in the final and had some family tragedy as well. So there's been a bit going on for Tsitsipas. And he also hasn't shown a lot on grass over his career to date. He hasn't played a lot, but I think, Tiafoe is a really tricky first round opponent here for him. When you kind of scroll down there, I could talk up Khachanov all I wanted, but he's made me look silly too many times. I'm just a bit over talking about him. Dan Evans, well, the pressure's gone onto him now with, Konta out in the women's. It's the big hope now for the home crowd, but I struggle to see him, getting out of this quarter. There's just a comment in the chat from Amazing that, De Minaur is on upset alert in round 1. And look, I'd agree with that. Seb Quarter is a really tricky first round match, but I think if he can get through that, I think he's a great chance. I think the grass brings De Minaur back into it a little bit. He doesn't have the strongest serve, but he does keep it flat. He does cover the court well. I think that's a great spot for him if he can get over that first hurdle. And I think the best of 5 helps him there.
Yeah. Candace, what do you see him?
I see a lot. The irony is from a betting perspective, I don't see a match in this quarter that jumps off the page for the first round, but I see a lot of potential second round matchups that would really interest me. Something like if we were able to get a rematch of Arthur Rinderknecht against Nikolai Balashvili, that would be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I do think that Rinderknecht potentially could upset him. It felt like in that second set at Halle, he was starting to figure Balashvili out. So a match like that I'm really looking forward to, or maybe someone like Riley Opelka against Suwon Kwon, if that one worked out. So nothing I love first round, but a couple of second round ones, if they wind up going that way, that do just certainly interest me as we move into the tournament. Tsitsipas, I think he has a really tough draw, to be honest. You mentioned Tiafoe there in the first round. Even if he were to make it past him, and keep in mind Tiafoe's form coming into this is unexpectedly good, I suppose. You're looking at maybe someone like Pospisil, who can always play well against some of these top players. We know that he's dangerous. Even someone like maybe a Kashanov or a Gerasimov after that. It's very, very difficult. It's one of those draws that is there that big name? No, but every single round you look at that potential mine that he has to make his way through, and I just don't think unless you get some big upsets here, I don't see that Tsitsipas is going to get any let up in this draw ever, right? There's never that spot that you're like, okay, here's where he might get that match to kind of ease his way back into the tournament. It looks tough from the very get-go. Going down towards the bottom of this section, certainly would be looking for me towards someone like a John Millman, against Bautista Agut. If he were to make it through that, I do think things are fairly open for him down towards the bottom. I'd look for it to be maybe a Kim and Shapovalov, and then, I think Millman should be able to beat him on the grass surface. So I actually have Millman winning this quarter. I have him taking out Tsitsipas. I just think the Greek might have a very, very tough go to get there, and maybe that is what Millman would need to be able to overcome him if the two were to end up playing each other. But an intriguing quarter. I think it's straightforward long term, but maybe in the second and third round, some appetizing betting matchups should they formalize.
I love that I don't need to hype up the Australians.
You hyped up the Americans, so I'm coming back.
Yeah.
I mean, I kind of agree with you, Candace, in that someone in that Millman RBA match is going to win the quarter. I just did not have that name picked. Bautista Agut had some positive success here. He's a little better on grass than I think people give him credit for. Yes, Millman's solid, but I think RBA advances through that match. And the rest of this little section, except for maybe Shapovalov or even Basilashvili, doesn't look too intimidating. As you look at the top, I do agree, Candace, that first match, even against Tiafoe for Tsitsipas, is going to be really dangerous. So, somebody like de Minaur, who may be challenged by Court a little bit there in that first match, probably runs into Dan Evans there in the third round, which isn't going to be easy, but having the weight of the entire country of England on your back might be a little heavier than Dan Evans can carry at this point. So I think things open up really nicely for de Minaur here. I think there's a lot of value in him. If your book offers to reach certain round props, there's value in that. I played him to win the quarter and things like that. But him and RBA, I think, are in nice spots to move through this, especially like, you said, Candace, since Tsitsipas looks like he's vulnerable. How about you, Steve?
Yeah, look, I agree with that. And just a comment in the chat from Hoya Rand, whether or what the match of the first round might be. I think that was in reference to Quarter versus de Minaur, but I have Dan Evans versus Feliciano Lopez. I think aesthetically, on grass, very, very good match to watch. And plus the crowd component into it as well. I think Lopez generally gets a bit of support wherever he goes, but against Dan Evans, it'll be a little bit tricky there. But yeah, certainly fascinating quarter, and I'm curious to see who can take advantage of this to end up in a semi in just under 2 weeks' time. Yeah,
that should be a lot of fun. We'll see if Lopez, what he's got left in the tank. This is, I didn't do the research on the men's side. On the women's side, this is a tournament where you tend to find older players win. I assume on the men's side, it probably just sort of follows the age of Djokovic, Federer, and Nadal over a period of time. But, when you look at it, it's a combination of, this surface being better for players who are a little more physically stronger, which happens actually as you get older. At the same time, the experience, a lot of these young players don't get a chance to play on grass. So I wonder if somebody like Lopez can upset the apple cart early there. As an ADM player, my fingers are crossed.
And I think, using that example, yes, you can make a case that that age is going to be going up progressively with Novak and Federer. But when you think back about players who have made decent runs, who have perhaps surprised, Sam Querrey made a run, Kevin Anderson, Cilic, there are players who made their way through in previous years to go pretty deep, unexpectedly. So, it's a good, you need that mix of experience on the surface, because it is a surface you just don't play on as much as the others. And obviously, a bit of skill doesn't go astray either.
No, it does not. On to the third quarter here. Mr. Berrettini, our seed at the top. Mr. Zverev down there at the bottom. We do have a Novak, but it's Dennis Novak, people. Hugo Humbert is going to play Nick Kyrgios. They're going to play tennis. They are not going to have a boxing match or a fight. Is that correct, Steve? Are they going to be playing tennis?
Well, I think they're going to start with a tennis match, and then we'll see what happens from there. Who knows?
It's a pretty interesting quarter, I think. It's, again, the first couple of quarters seemed a little more straightforward. You have some names like Ruud here. We'll see if Uncle Tony can maybe help FA on grass. We'll change the pace for him. What do you see here, Candace?
I really like this quarter. I think it's a lot of fun. Towards the top, you mentioned Berrettini. Obviously, a good little pocket for him there. It could get tricky. Someone like Isner or Moutet. We'll see which one of them comes through. But all in all, he should be able to at least string through a couple of matches in there. Where I am most intrigued, though, is that pocket it's halfway down, the bottom of the top portion of this quarter. And you see Kei Nishikori, Alexei Popyrin, Jordan Thompson, Casper Ruud. That little pocket is of major interest to me. I found myself leaning Nishikori. I know maybe things were a little bit dicey for him in the lead up to this, 2 long matches, and he's kind of lamented since losing to Korda. He felt like he should have won that match, but maybe it'll be a motivating factor. We've seen him do well here at Wimbledon on a couple of occasions. He's done well on the grass during his career, but I think if he can, I feel like with Nishikori, we're always saying if he could find that past form, no matter what stage of his career it was. But if he can, this is a gettable little pocket. I mean, he should be able to beat Popyrin and kind of ease his way in. Jordan Thompson or Casper Ruud, a little bit tougher, but certainly even if it's Ruud, it's not his preferred surface. Then you're looking at Karatsev. Again, not maybe super easy, but definitely beatable. And if you're talking about, an unseeded player going against a seed, I have no problem going against, Matteo Berrettini here. Obviously not his preferred service either. So that's an interesting little pocket, and one that I will be paying very, very close attention to, that little quartet there at the bottom of that kind of top portion of this quarter. Moving down towards the bottom, it'll be interesting. Felix should be able to beat Montero here on the grass. Then he, maybe gets someone like a Jo-Wilfried Tsonga, who, fitness is obviously a little bit of a concern with him. It has been for quite some time. And then, Kyrgios or Humbert, I suppose. So that's, again, a little bit of a pocket there for Felix, that he should be able to win those matches. And for me, I honestly think that might, when you get away from the 2 big players, Berrettini and Zverev, that's probably the storyline of this quarter is, what can Felix do? Again, at a major, he found himself in what I would consider a kind draw as far as, what you're going to get at this level of tournament. And we have to see if he's able to make something of it, because my goodness, it's been an incredibly disappointing season for him, especially when you're seeing what some of those other players kind of who were in that younger group with him, someone like a Ruud, someone even like I know Tsitsipas a little bit older, but that kind of next generation, the steps they've all been able to take forward. Down at the bottom, Zverev, I see him making his way through. He has a real nice little pocket there as well. So for me, I actually had it being Felix against Zverev there on the bottom end, with Zverev coming through, Berrettini against Nishikori on that top part. And I have Nishikori beating Berrettini in there and actually taking the quarter. It's totally, just a betting proposition, I suppose. He's just at large enough odds that if you were to string together, nothing new form we've seen from him in the past on the surface, I think this is a quarter that's wide open, and one where I could see a name who's not obvious come through.
And Nishikori's got to avoid those 4 and 5 set matches. He just loves to be out there playing tennis. We'll see if he can do that. Steve, how do you see this quarter shaking out?
I'll touch on Nishikori before I go to the other players. he's a magician. And when I say he's a magician, his ability to turn 3-set wins into 5-set wins is second to none.
He's unparalleled in this field.
Exactly. It's actually phenomenal. And I think that's kind of my issue a little bit with him, is that, yes, his 5-set record is fantastic. And if he wins in 5 sets at some point in this fortnight, everyone will come out and tweet about how great he is in 5th sets and how great he is in deciders. But at the same time, he shouldn't have been in 5th sets in about 60% of those matches. The names that he ends up in 5th sets against are names that he should be beating more comfortably. So I can't wait to read those tweets again, probably when he ends up playing Popyrin to like 12-10 in the 5th set and then has to retire injured down a set in the second round. But that's part of the reason I can't take him in outrights anymore, because he just spends so much unnecessary energy early and then digs himself a hole, and he'll end up coming off a 5-setter and facing someone who then just gets a cakewalk through because he can't, bend over anymore. With him, I can only really take him in individual matches now, I think. And look, the last time I backed him, I got an email calling me an overrated muppet. So it's been a sore point, Nishikori.
Oh,
You poor fella.
I think Berrettini, I'd say I have this as Berrettini's best surface, although there's a limited sample size in terms of what he's been able to do, particularly in the last month as well. He looked pretty good. But, whilst I might be high on him in that regard, but I keep coming back to his backhand. I know his slice has got a little bit better, but I can't get involved with him in an outright, because all I can picture, looking at that little pocket of the draw, is a third round against John Isner, who just serves consistently at his backhand for 3, 4, or 5 sets. And yes, he might win tie breaks, but also he might not win tie breaks. That just makes it really, really tough. If he comes out of that pocket, and assuming that Novak is still in the draw, he's probably still going to be double figure odds anyway, and I might jump in and kind of take him then in the outright market. But I need to see him kind of handle a couple of quick ones. And look, let's not forget, Guido Pei is a Wimbledon quarterfinalist from last time out. So he's no pushover in the first round. I think he beat, was it Kevin Anderson and Raonic last time out?
Yeah.
Here. My eyes, though, are drawn down to the bottom. As you said, he's had a disappointing year, but Felix Auger-Aliassime, I think he's around the 110s or so at the moment, and around $8, I think it is, to win the quarter. The ability, what he's been able to produce over his career on grass, over that small sample, it's pretty impressive. Ignore the fact that he struggles in finals, and you can, cross that bridge when he gets there. But I think this is a really good spot for him. And I think, compared to, say, Berrettini, for example, I don't think he has that weakness. I think he's really, really good at, he's able to handle low balls relatively well. He's got a good serve. He's capable at the net. It's a great spot, I think, for him. The one to keep an eye on in that bottom portion is Brandon Nakashima. I think he can make a little bit of a run maybe through the first week. He looked exceptional in qualifying, and it's amazing what getting rid of Pat Cash can do to your confidence. I think he's in a really good spot. He's a heavy favourite against Fritz, so I wouldn't be getting involved probably in that first match, but I think he's one to keep an eye on there. Kyrgios versus Humbert is obviously one of the bigger round 1 matches, but, Kyrgios we haven't seen since February. And I've said multiple times over the last couple of months that probably the biggest area and probably the biggest issue for Kyrgios is the fact that the last Call of Duty game was pretty good, because that seems to be where he spent all of his time. So, look, probably wait and see. I think he's like 70-1 in the outright market, but he's, $3 in this first match. So you're assuming if he gets through the first round that he's, 25-1, which is a little bit ridiculous off such little tennis. So I've gone a little bit wider. I've gone with Felix here, and keep an eye on Nakashima to maybe get through and, maybe have Zverev on upset alert there in round 3.
Yeah, Nakashima, I'm not sure. He really struggles mentally in some of these matches, and I'm not sure he's ready for best-of-5 tennis. I actually think Fritz, if he's okay coming back from having his knee scoped, is a kind of a live underdog there. But I like Berrettini. I know that Isner being there is maybe a little troublesome, but Isner is not in any sort of great form. Yes, this is his best surface, and he generally does well at this tournament. But I think Berrettini, like you said, Steve, if he can get past that match, which I'm not too worried about, to be perfectly honest, he's has smooth sailing here until the quarterfinals, where I think he can take down Zverev. I think he can take down anybody else that's really here. FAA will give him some trouble, but I think just looking at that section, simply because, again, I'm not sure Nishikori's going to make it that far, given how much tennis he's going to have to play. Rude we like on clay. I actually think his game can work well on this surface, but again, missing the reps there, and there's just nobody else. Maybe Karatsev, I don't know, but I like this section for Berrettini action. I've got him coming out of this quarter and with a good chance to make the final.
I'm happy to circle back to that Nishikori conversation if he beats Popyrin in straight sets.
Yeah, that'll be one, like you said, that number's not going to move too much live. So if he can win the first two matches in less than 7 sets, then maybe that's a little appealing.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts here, guys, before we jump into the last quarter of the men's draw?
I'm all good to move on.
Mr. Federer here, our top seed in the fourth quarter. Medvedev, the number 2 seed in the tournament, down there at the bottom. Some interesting names here in the middle, but I think this looks really nice for the Russian Medvedev. I know that, yes, he did win a tournament last week. He might not have looked incredible doing it, but man, this is a nice draw if you can get past Marin Cilic. It's kind of similar to the Berrettini conversation. There's just sort of one person hanging out there, but if you can get past that, I think it looks good. What say you, Stephen?
I agree. A couple of weeks ago, I put out a joke about Medvedev being $7 in the outright market for Wimbledon, and I thought that was a bit ridiculous. But hey, he's $9 now, so I can come back the other way. I think this is a pretty decent draw for him, and there's 2 parts to it. I think when you look at it, the 2 names that are probably the biggest obstacles for him on past experience and form are probably Federer and Cilic. Federer, there's question marks around the fitness and physical side of things, and particularly the best of 5. Didn't look great in sets 2, and didn't look very great. Didn't look great in set 3 against Aliassime as well a couple of weeks ago. So I'm a little bit wary there, and I think I've come to the realization with that yes, I think what is he 13-1 or 14-1? If he wins it, it's probably the best Grand Slam win of anyone at any point in terms of a player coming and targeting a spot and actually delivering. But I'm happy to not be involved in that. I think at that price. And the other one's Cilic. I think when you look at it, there's a lot of talk, and the outright price for him has come in significantly off that. Was it Stuttgart he won?
Yes.
I'm trying to think where it was. And that's great. That's fantastic that he won a tournament, but also that tournament was played in the second week of Roland Garros, and there wasn't. I wouldn't call it the most competitive field that we've ever encountered, and we all know what Felix does in finals. So I think we can put a little bit of a question mark or an asterisk next to that tournament. So those 2 things lead me towards Medvedev here. Struff is obviously a challenge first up, but look, he knows he's played a couple of sets against him the other week when he lost, and he's won a tournament since. Again, not the strongest field, but he just got time on court, and I think that's what he needed. He needed time to adjust. I think that's a great spot here. In the middle there, probably one of the seeds on upset alert. First up is Carreño Busta. Get Sam Querrey first up. But, outside of that, I think it's a decent draw, I think, for Medvedev, and he's in that little pocket now where he can start to take advantage of draws and being on the other side to Novak, and it's only a matter of time before he's world number 1. And one part of the world's going to hate that.
Candice, what do you see here in the fourth quarter?
Yeah, quite a bit of similarity to what we saw, or what at least was just explained by Steve. I mean, you look there at the top, and honestly, I could see Mannarino making a deep run. Obviously, he's been playing well. His best surface, Federer first round. Could Federer win it? Sure, you just never know what you're going to get at this stage. Obviously, as was alluded to, fitness is a really big concern there. But I mean, Mannarino, I know, he's up there in age a little bit himself, but goodness, Federer first round, and then maybe Richard Gasquet or somebody second round. It doesn't get much nicer than that when you're someone looking to make a little bit of a run. Cam Norrie, obviously a name that jumps off the page, not just as a local hope, but someone who we've seen have some success in recent times. I agree that PCB is the seeded player in here that you do show some concern for there right off the bat. The other one who maybe I would lean to as a seeded player that I could see going down first round is Hurkacz. He's another one who jumps off the page. Just I'm not sure he's playing well enough lately. But, aside from the obvious, aside from Medvedev, who is in that little pocket at the bottom and does look to be equipped to, potentially make it far, the player who jumped out to me, who was a little off the beaten path in this draw, was Alexander Bublik. Potentially going against Kukushkin there first round. He played him recently and defeated him. He's played well against Dimitrov. He's defeated him recently as well. He's had success against someone like a Hurkacz. If you think he makes it there, or even someone like a Mazzetti or Giron, just that top four, that top quartet ahead of him, on top of him, is not anything that is super scary, I suppose. So Alexander Bublik is someone I could see making it quite far. I could see it being him versus Medvedev to come out of that bottom section. Obviously he'd be an enormous underdog should the two of them play. But again, if you're looking off the beaten path, a little bit away from the obvious, Bublik would be the one who I would be looking to. And he does well enough on this surface, and he's done well enough against, even the big name players. I know it was clay, and we know Medvedev, very vocally doesn't like the clay. But if you remember back to the first round of the French Open when he played against Bublik, he wasn't blown off the court. Obviously, you expect the Russian to do much better here on the grass surface. But for somebody who is a little bit off the beaten path, he would just be the one that I'm looking to.
And there's some interesting names there, but again, I just circle back to Medvedev, and not just his game, but his mentality here in best of 5 tennis. You look at this group, and there are some players that maybe best of 3 I think could challenge him on grass, but his ability to kind of just be, have better mental fortitude really than a lot of these guys, I think is really going to matter. Obviously, Cilic, again, that could be tough. We'll see who comes out of that middle section there, but I think we're going to have Medvedev come through here. The more and more I look at this, the more I feel like it's a Medvedev-Berrettini semifinal for the right to lose 3-0, 4-1 to Djokovic there in the final. Any other thoughts here, guys, in the fourth quarter before we get into our picks?
Just a quick comment on Struff. I think he is probably he's a perfect example of how important it is to be ranked 30th instead of 40th in, the tennis world, particularly around Grand Slams. You have a look. So I think it's his last 6 Grand Slams, he's been seeded twice in those 6, and he's won both his first rounds when he's been seeded. When he's been unseeded, 3 of those 4 first rounds have come against Novak Djokovic, Andrei Rublev, and now Daniil Medvedev. Like, it's, get yourself into a seeded position. All of a sudden, you're not facing someone, higher than you until the 3rd round there. He just needs to try and figure out a way. Like, he beat Rublev at Roland Garros and made a little run there, and he's gone down in the rankings just based off, how the rankings are working at the moment. So if there's ever an example of a player, the importance of being ranked, in that 28 to 32 instead of around that 40 mark, I think Struff is a perfect example of how dodgy and unfortunate these draws can be, even though apparently they're rigged, but that's fine.
It's good to be seeded, folks.
All righty. Let's start off with our aces for the tournament. We'll start with you, Alex. Who have you gone for your ace?
Oh, I tried. I looked. I did everything I could, but it's so hard to see anybody but Novak Djokovic winning this tournament. He is the best player in the draw. He has one of the easiest spots in the draw. I think some of his biggest competitors he is not going to see until the final, if he sees at all. I don't know how you pick anybody else.
Candace, who have you gone for?
I am going for Novak Djokovic. I think that there's a big gap between him and everybody else, just given the players who've been unable to play. And I think that his draw is even easier than what you see for Medvedev. So going with Djokovic.
Fair enough. Now, Look, I've gone for someone else, and I haven't just done that because you two have gone for Novak and to be a difference of opinion, but I've actually gone for Medvedev. I think at his price around that $9.20, I think he's at the moment. When you look at his draw, the fact that he is able to stay away from Novak, I think he's a decent chance here. You know, he's got the serve and he's got the game to be a threat. He just needed to figure out that he could actually play on the surface, and I think he's done that. You know, hasn't been against fantastic opposition, but also to be, was it query 4-2 in a final? You know, I mean, you're doing something right. I think he's able to look after his serve for the most part. It's just a matter of whether he can kind of keep his head in the game, you know, for the majority of the fortnight. But I think a good draw there. And like I said before, I think, you know, I probably would have made a case for, you know, a couple of the other players as well if they ended up in that spot in the draw. I think with Federer and the way the draw is, but I think it's a good spot for him to kind of build momentum across the fortnight. Now, Candice, who's your value pick for the tournament?
I'm going with Kei Nishikori. I love him in that quarter. Totally understand it might take 50 bajillion matches to get there, but I just oftentimes, as I've said on here, when I'm picking value picks, I'm usually doing it from a draws perspective. Somebody who has a really favorable draw, and I think he has that. They've rolled out the Wimbledon red carpet. We'll just hope he doesn't trip on it on the way in.
That sounds fair. Well, yeah, hopefully he doesn't spend a lot of time, as that's more tripping opportunities.
It is funny, though, how, you know, you spoke about Nishikori, and it is funny how when you're watching big tournaments like a Wimbledon, like a French Open, that they'll be like, the announcers will be like, oh, we're going to take you out to this super outside court where there's a 5-set match going. And if you watch enough tennis, you're like, oh, okay, it's one of these 5 players. Like, you always know.
Yeah, just take your pick. It's normally like him or like Zverev's down 2 sets to love and then just decides to start playing. There's a few like real niche areas that they just kind of cross to. But look, Alex, where have you gone for your value here for the tournament?
It's tough to find one from an outright perspective, but I talked about how much I like the draws from Medvedev and Berrettini, but instead of attacking them from an outright perspective, because this is such a big tournament, we have some warm markets, and you can bet on what the exact finals matchup is. So what I've done is I've bet the final to be Djokovic versus Berrettini at 7-1, and the final to be Djokovic versus Medvedev at 5-1. And basically, for me, that just is a better way for me to get some more value on Medvedev. Again, I don't have to worry about him winning. All he has to do is get there. Same thing with Berrettini, as opposed to trying to have to figure out what to do in that final if it is Djokovic, if you want to hedge or buy out or do something goofy like that. Just approach it from this angle. It gives me a chance to back Novak to get to the final, which obviously we feel confident about. And these 2 other players at some nice numbers. So Djokovic, Medvedev final 5-1, Djokovic, Berrettini final 7-1.
Look at you just going out wide and finding some value in some niche markets in the ATP. It's not even the women's.
Try my best.
You continue to surprise. My value pick is one that's available at Bet365 at the moment. And it's basically, in my opinion, it's Andrei Rublev to beat Delbonis, Harris, Fognini, and Schwartzman, worst case scenario. So that they have a to reach round pick, and Andrei Rublev to reach the quarterfinal is $2.75 or plus 175. And I think when you look at those players there in that little pocket, Schwartzman pair, you know, it'll be either probably Schwartzman, Sinner, Fognini, Harris, probably the biggest names, I guess, in terms of being a threat for Andrei Rublev there. And I think over best of 5 and what we've seen from Rublev, I don't think any of them are going to be, you know, I think this is a value spot and the best way to kind of target Rublev making the second week, but also getting out of that position before he probably has to face Novak, which I think he would be a capable chance. He could redline and, you know, when you look at kind of players that have beaten Novak here before, you know, you need that power and you need that ability to kind of hit through him. And I think Rublev has that. But I think this is a good way to get, you know, through that first pocket of the draw against players who probably aren't the strongest, and if he brings a level close to what we've seen from him, I think he should be able to get through there. So that is Rublev to reach the quarterfinal. Doesn't have to win, just needs to win rounds 1 to 4 to get through at that point. Now, unforced errors for the tournament. We might start with you, Candice. Who have you gone for as your unforced error?
I have gone for Roger Federer. I get we're kind of piece working the schedule together, all gearing towards Wimbledon. I understand he's going to be very motivated. I just haven't seen it on the court, and that first round match is rough. I think he loses first round. So going with Roger.
And I am also going with Roger. Again, if he wins the tournament, fantastic, good on him. It's just I haven't seen enough from him in the matches that he's played in this schedule that he's supposedly used to target Wimbledon. I don't think it's all worked out as well as he probably had planned in his head. But yeah, look, if he wins the tournament, I'm not going to be disappointed. I think it'd be a phenomenal effort. But I just, if he did lose to Manarino in the first round, I wouldn't think any less of him. Is probably my best way to describe it. And Alex, who have you gone for?
I know that he is arguably the most beloved man in tennis, but Mr. Andy Murray, I don't know if he's coming. I assume he is. We haven't heard anything, but we know that given the condition of his hips at his age at this point, he is a threat to withdraw from any tournament. Hope he plays very well. Hope he gets a win or two here for the home fans, but giving Mr. Murray a pass this fortnight.
Look at us. It's 10 years is a long time in this business. That these two used to battle it out for Grand Slams, and now we're just forgiving them for whatever they do.
Aww.
It's tough getting old.
Anyone, who have you got, Alex, as your overvalued?
As I look for my overvalued player here, I think it is Mr. Federer. With all due respect to one of, if not the greatest player of all time, he should not be among the favorites to win this tournament. I forget where he is last time I looked, but he was like 5th, 6th favorite. That's preposterous and ridiculous. So with all due respect, don't bet any money on Roger Federer. And if you want, let me know. I'll take it.
And I have gone for Stefanos Tsitsipas as the overvalued. I don't know. I just can't shake. I watched, I think, the entire Tsitsipas-Fabiano match of a couple of years ago where Fabiano beat him in 5. And Tsitsipas was a highly ranked player at that point in time. So it's not like he's taken, significant strides forward, rankings-wise. I think he was ranked 6th or 5th at that point in time. But I just think there are players that I would have rather had seen play a lead-up tournament, and I understand why Tsitsipas hasn't. But I also don't think, with Tiafoe was a very capable first-round opponent. I'm really curious to see what happens here with Tsitsipas, whether he, if he finds himself down a set or, starts to kind of question himself, I think a little bit on the surface, what might happen. But I just think he's a little bit too short. How about you, Candice? Who have you gone for?
I have gone for Stefanos Tsitsipas. Again, I understand why he didn't play a lead-up tournament. I mean, he looked dog-tired by the end of Roland Garros in that match. But I completely agree. This draw of his every time I look at it, it just looks worse. It's just low-key brutal. You have Tiafoe, who is powerful and very informed there in the first round. But it doesn't get easier. And I think that's, again, the big thing I'm going to harp on. Whether it's Pospisil, Kashanov, Dan Evans, or Demonar, whoever comes out of that bottom portion. I mean, that is a very, very rough draw. And unless you get some significant upsets there in that first or second round, he's looking at a draw where he's not going to get any let up. And I think, even if he were to win all those matches, which I'll be perfectly honest with you, in my bracket, I have him winning all those matches. So it's not like I see him necessarily losing early. I just think he's going to be on the back foot with maybe a couple of tough, long matches there right off the gate. If he does win them, not his best surface, and he is very short, right? We're seeing 7s and 8s for him for a guy who we haven't seen do well here at Wimbledon before. I get why he needs to be protected, especially with the form we've seen from him this year, and all credit to him, he's been playing quite well. But I think he's a guy who's going to be happy that the grass season is a short one.
Definitely. Well, I think we've found a couple of decent spots there, although Novak is obviously the favorite, and something I've put into my preview that'll be out, I think, within the hour or so is, I'm looking to kind of get Novak at a price maybe around that $4 or $5 in the outright market, when he, you would assume, has some sort of lapse at some point or has some sort of medical timeout for some small issue and people overreact. I think when you look through the, I think he hit 15-1 in that market, at Roland Garros when he was down to Mazzetti. So it's just the $1.83 or whatever it is at the moment just seems a little bit too short.
Right about
but
that.
we might wrap up the men's there, and we are going to say goodbye to Candace for this episode.
Yeah, we are. Got to work the real job. That's the downside of doing some of these on the weekends every once in a while. But I
Give
know
people the news.
my picks for the women are with both of you guys' capable hands. So people are going to have to wait to stay tuned. But you have a lot to look forward to, because if the men's side seemed like we were all kind of in agreement in some areas, I know, because I can see our women's selections, that is very much not the case. So I'm sure you guys will have a lot of fun discussing.
You picked Conta to win, yeah? I'm just double checking.
Of course. Gotta stick with my trend. You guys know what I do.
Yeah, it's the Flipkins rule.
Mm-hmm.
Gonna roll that money over into Yafan Wang now. You'll be fine.
Yeah.
Exactly. But thanks for letting me on as always.
No worries. And we will figure out a time to chat, I think, during the fortnight as well. Hopefully we can give a little bit of an update at some time when all the schedules come together.
Absolutely.
Perfect. Alrighty. We will chat to you soon, and thanks for jumping on. Alrighty. This is your time to shine, Alex.
I'm ready. I may or may not have already done this once before today.
Alrighty. Rapid fire. First quarter. Off we go.
We don't know if Ashley Barty is healthy. We heard that she had a leg injury, an abdomen injury. It's always hard to tell. Which forced her to withdraw in the last tournament she was supposed to enter. She did not play Eastbourne, which is one of her favorite events to play and would have been her choice for a warm-up event. So she comes into this tournament with no grass matches played. There's a lot of questions here. Is our number one seed. It is a quarter that I think gets pretty tricky here at about her third or fourth match. We did lose Joe Konta, but we've got Coco Vandeweghe there, Katerina Siniakova, both very comfortable on the grass, can challenge Ashley Barty there. You start to look down, there could be Sevastova there at that level. Even someone like Pekovic is very comfortable. Barbara Krejcikova, the French Open champion, has not played a grass match since 2017, but has all the skills you would look for. Azarenka, another player with injury questions, but we've got Kontaveit there. She looked great last week. Andriescu, with all due respect, probably not a spot for her, but Ostapenko down there looking pretty solid. So this quarter, despite having one of, if not the tournament favorite, depending on where you look, actually looks kind of wide open to me. What say you, Stephen?
It's open to me, and I'm trying to not follow in the mistakes I made in Roland Garros and back play or support players who have some sort of fitness question marks. And I think this whole quarter is a little bit up in the air because we don't know how close to 100% Ash Barty is, and we don't know how close to 100% Azarenka is. And I have Kontaveit on upset alert in round one against Vondrousova. And we don't know how fit Andriescu is, and she's got Cornet in the first round in a really tricky matchup. So this could throw up anything, I think, this quarter. And, I didn't mind initially, Konta, I think, in that spot, but obviously things have changed now. I don't like Wang Yafan quite as much. So yeah, look, I think there's a lot of opportunity here, but I'm curious, and I haven't really jumped in with anything in this quarter as such at the moment. But if Barty looks good in round one, I'll probably have a look at and see there. And even, if Azarenka looks good, I think that draws pretty favourable down the bottom there. Ostapenko, who knows? Like, it's great that she won. She's so up and down, though. I think if you got her odds for Wimbledon before she won last week, fantastic. But now she's sitting around that. Is it mid-20s, low 20s to 1? And that's a lot to ask of, a player that, yes, her best is very, very good, but you're also reliant on her getting through 7 matches without finding a real unforced error heavy performance. And I think that's my question mark for her, but it's also my question mark for a number of other players as we kind of roll through. So where have you kind of landed? Have you got a particular spot here or a particular pocket of the draw to attack?
Pretty tough. As much as I agree with you on the Ostapenko outright price, her price to win the quarter is still hovering around 9-1. I think that's a great bet.
That looks good.
Krejcikova to win the quarter, I think I got that right around 10-1. This is probably a little bit of me being a fanboy and a lot of me trusting her doubles experience in this situation. Her ability to serve, her ability to volley is going to be really important here. Just really like her as a player, and I'm going to continue to back her as much as I can until the markets start to price her as kind of the 15th to 20th best player in some of these spots. So, again, she hasn't played on grass since 2017, but should have a lot of the skills for it. So really just looking at 2-quarter prices here because it's just so wide open. Looking at my bracket, I have Ashley Barty beating Ostapenko, but it's simply because I had to pick somebody.
I think another one that might I think the more I've looked at this, the more I kind of keep changing my mind a little bit. But even a Sevastova or someone to be able to kind of make a run through there, I think she's looks solid, and again kind of translates okay to the grass. But I do think if Azarenka looks good in round one, and I think I've backed her twice in outright markets this year, and both times she's withdrawn during the tournament. So I haven't gone at her yet, but I think her withdrawal last week is probably a combo of, yes, she beat Cornet and it was like 3 hours, 15 minutes on court. She just didn't want to back up then and play Sorribes Tormo in what would have been 2 to 3 hours again the week before a Grand Slam. So I'm hoping she's not that injured, but I need to see her first up against Kozlova.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of wait and see in this event. We'll talk about some more players, but a fun, wide-open first quarter. Are we ready to jump into the second?
I am. Once my computer catches up with me.
Well, once we start to see, we'll have Serena Williams here, and one of the better chances she's had to win a slam in a little while. I know that people felt good about her at the Australian and the U.S. Open the last couple of years, but with Osaka in the field, that's really tough. You start to look at this field with the questions around Barty and some of the other names that we'll get to. She's got a real shot here. I mean, it's not the easiest draw in the world. I think, Sasnovich can test her a little bit in that first match. Her third match will probably be Konyu, which will be tough, or Kerber there. That's going to be really difficult. Her match after that, Belincic, maybe Coco Gauff, that could be really tough. And then Mahova. I mean, this is just a really rough quarter for her, but man, it would be exciting to see her win another slam. How do you see this quarter playing out?
Look, I think this is going to be the last time we see Serena Williams as a favorite going into a Grand Slam. Unfortunately for her, though, it's at 7 to 1 instead of, odds on or whatever she has been for so many of her Grand Slams. When I first look at this, and I've settled on one name in particular from this quarter. When you look at the quarter on paper, and if you said to someone that you had Serena Williams, Angelique Kerber, Coco Gauff, Belinda Bencic, and Carolina Mahova in the same quarter at Wimbledon, you'd go, well, that's a pretty competitive quarter. And it is. But then when you look at it and you split the quarter in half and realize 4 of those players are in the bottom half and one of them is by themselves up the top, I'm instantly drawn to Mahova. And I think I'm so, just before the draw came out, I was really high on Bencic, Coco, Kerber all at once. And I think you need to respect Williams to an extent, given what she's been able to produce on grass over the years. But they're just so close to each other in the outright. It makes it really tricky, and I wish that they were somewhere else. I have Kerber beating Serena, and that Coco Bencic one could go either way if they were to make their way through. But as I said, Mahova up the top. The closest seed is Pavlyuchenkova, who hasn't set the world on fire on grass over her career. And look, she did lose to Svitolina here a couple of years ago, but a lot's changed in that time. Mahova certainly improved, and Svitolina maybe dropped back a little bit. And that was a really, really close, I think it was 6-4, 7-5. Close match, lots of breaks, lots of close games. So look, I like Mahova here to make a bit of a run. We know that she can go deep in a Grand Slam. We saw that at the Australian Open. So she's been there. She's got the game, and I think everything translates pretty well here for her on the grass. So I'm curious to see how she goes. But where have you? I know you've been keen on a couple of players, particularly down the bottom there. Have you landed anywhere in particular?
Well, I'll talk about Mahova a little bit, agree with you there, but there's 2 quarters basically where I loaded up from an outright perspective. It's this one in the fourth quarter, and we'll get there in a little bit. But Konju at 150 to 1 looked really nice to me. Kerber's 50 to 1, that looks really good. Bencic 40 to 1 looks good. As much as I'm enthused about Serena and watching her play and her chances actually to win this event, I'm happy to back to go against her here and back some of these women at really large numbers. And Mahova at 40 to 1 might be the best bet from an outright perspective in the field. I mean, she has one of, if not the easiest draws in the whole tournament. being as far away from Serena as she can be in the quarter, waiting until the semifinals to face Barty if she makes it that far, and then as far away from possible as the fourth quarter, which when we get there, you'll see what I'm talking about. Some nice names in here for me. I do have Mahova advancing out of the quarter. I keep going back and forth on who she beats. It'll probably be Serena or Kerber. I think that the winner of that Serena-Kerber match probably loses to Mahova here in the quarterfinals. But this is kind of a fun quarter and a little more open than maybe you think with Serena being there.
And I think there's one particularly down in that pocket. As I said, the seeds are obviously big names, but then also Anna Konju is another name there that pops up as, you know, potential second-round opponent for Kerber. So it is a very, very competitive little pocket there.
Yeah, it is. This is a really fun quarter. The bottom section is as good as about any section in any draw. All right, I think we're ready for the third quarter. Pliskova is here in her quest to avoid Jessie Pegula. I'm not sure actually she'll even make it that far, but Pegula will probably get knocked out. This sets up really nice for Ms. Kvitova. Some interesting names there in the bottom, but really, again, the Czech stands out to me. What say you?
I completely agree. But again, last time, a bit like Azarenka, last time I backed Petra Kvitova was Roland Garros, and she managed to roll her ankle on the way to a Zoom press conference. So it's been too many of those this year. It's been fun. Between that and I think most of the times I backed Halep, she's ended up injured as well. It was Miami and whatever that recent tournament was that she hurt her calf. So it's been fun. I have gone with Petra here. I think it's a good spot for her draw wise. We know what she could do on the grass. While she didn't win last week in the tournament, she didn't win the tournament. She took Kerber to a third set tiebreak in her second match for the day, which suggests that, you know, she was able to get, you know, was it 5 or 6 sets? Not 5, yeah. I think it was. I think Podoroska, I think they had a really long tiebreak. So to get 5 sets out in a day suggests that the ankle's pretty good, and also push the eventual title winner in Kerber more than anyone else. I think she may have even served for that match. So I think Petra is a great spot here. So cue Sloane Stephens to make some sort of absurd performance in round 1. Looking elsewhere, in my hour up preview that will be out shortly, I've actually put 0.1 units on Karolina Pliskova just so I can sleep at night. I backed her last week and she won 1 set. But I think, look, it's one of those ones that if she finds range with her serve, the conditions aren't the worst for her, and 65-1 or whatever it was, that, you know, I think it's worth, you know, just 0.1 units, particularly because she's probably the first big name that I'm worried about, you know, potentially matching shot for shot with Kvitova. So, you know, if backing Kvitova, I've gone for a very minuscule stake there on Pliskova just to not have to worry about that match if they were to meet. But looking to the bottom, you know, Madison Keys is another one that falls into that Ostapenko category for me of, yeah, she can set the world on fire, but she can also hit the back fence more often than not. So it's hard to really get a gauge on, you know, I'd rather get involved with her specific matches than trust her to do, you know, find her range 7 matches in a row. But yeah, it's a funny little draw here, particularly with a couple of, you know, decent grass court players, you know, like Golubic, who's, you know, playing Kudermetova, played well last week, lost to Kontaveit. You know, there's a few names there. You know, I think Wang is a great chance against Kennan in the first round. So there is every chance that a couple of these seeds get knocked out early, but hopefully one of them isn't Petra.
Yeah. It's, you know, as much as I think this is Kvitova's quarter, curious to see what Kudermetova can do here. I think she has an opportunity to make it to the quarterfinals. That match with her versus Mertens is what I'm expecting to see there. Should be a lot of fun. But we'll, again, see if Kvitova's in form, if she's feeling good. The first couple matches are pretty easy. Maybe Samsonova will test her a little bit there. But Pliskova, I mean, Zidansek, I think it'll be Potapova there. Then, you know, Allison Risk probably. That's a really tough draw. So although this is her best surface and she's finally at an opportunity to round in a little bit of form, it just has a really tough draw here for once. So I think it is Kvitova's quarter to lose. I have heard her win the quarter and all sorts of good stuff like that. But curious to see if maybe somebody like Kudermetova, maybe Keys can kind of pop here.
Also, it's great to see Samsonova be given a wild card for, you know, her tournament win the other week. Yeah. She's playing really well. and she's not British, but she's still got a wild card. So it's great to see some of those players actually being rewarded for good lead-in form on the surface.
Yeah, it was a good use of wild card, Wimbledon. Well done.
Very
Let's
rare.
jump into the fourth quarter, which is stacked. This is probably the best quarter of either draw. Iga Swiatek at the top, Sabalenka at the bottom, Alexandrova, Rybakina, Sakkari, Muguruza, Ons Jabeur, Petra Martic, and some other interesting names in the middle there that aren't bolded. Who do you have coming out of this mess, Stephen?
I have Ons Jabeur. I went through a number of different players, but I think that from a starting point pre-tournament, I've got Jabeur out of this section. What I'm interested in, though, in round one is, one, I want to see how fit Muguruza is. Obviously, she looked a little bit better last time on court, but it hasn't been great recently. But the match at the top of this draw and the match at the bottom of this draw, round one-wise, are two of the more interesting ones. Niculescu versus Sabalenka is one of the most contrasting styles you'll probably come across. And I can't wait to see what happens. I actually have no idea what's going to happen there, but I want to watch it because I think it's going to be a great test, I think, for Sabalenka to figure out how she's going to overcome that situation besides just hitting the cover off the ball. And Shea is also a tough out for Swiatek. I think that's a really tough match there. So if they look good, I might add them into kind of my outright position, taking some of the bigger prices. But I think, at the moment, if I had to pick someone, it's Jabeur's lead-in form has looked solid. She got that title win finally. She was able to break through at the top level there. She's got the game that's suited to the grass. I don't have an issue with her losing in 3 sets to Ostapenko. She was coming off a long week and also still, pushed Ostapenko to 3 sets. So I think there's great opportunity here. Looking elsewhere, I mean, this is probably one of those quarters where, as I said, the seeds all have some tricky first-round matches. Even, Sakkari has a tricky first round against Rus. So I'm curious, and I'm probably going to make some more calls on this quarter after the first round. But pre-tournament, I'm kind of leading towards Jabeur here.
Yeah, I like Jabeur. I'm avoiding Swiatek. She hasn't sounded terribly confident in her ability to play on the surface. Sabalenka, we know, struggles in some of these tournaments. I mean, it's so hard to play with such little margin for 2 whole weeks like this. And you hit the nail on the head. These first-round matches are going to be tough. I mean, they're big favorites in these matches, but the underdogs are going to be able to challenge them and take advantage of a bad day if they're having it. As I look through at some players that I do like, I mentioned this was another quarter where I'm starting to stack up some outrights. Alexandrova, Rybakina, and Jabeur all look great to me. But I actually have Muguruza picked coming out of the quarter. I thought she looked fantastic in her 2 matches leading up to this. The third one, she ran into Alizé Cornet, which I know she lost in 3 sets, but go back and look at Alizé Cornet's history on grass. She's really good. She just seems to cause a lot of problems for people. And if Muguruza can get comfortable here, I think she is probably the most talented player in this draw. Yes, I think Jabeur can beat her in that 3rd round match, but the match will be on Muguruza's racket. She will really be the one determining a lot of what goes on there. So I like her to come out of this quarter, but I see a lot of value again on Alexandrova, who has been very quiet and not talked about too much on a surface that is perfect for the way that she likes to play tennis. Rybakina, I think we're getting a little value on her simply given the MTO that she took in that 3rd set in her last match. I actually thought she looked okay when she came back out. And this is a great surface for Jabeur. It was so nice to see her be able to put it together and get her first title. Usually my concerns with her are fitness related, but she has every other day off, rain withstanding, which we mentioned. It's probably going to be rainy. But she should have some time off to recover, which is always important for her. So I do like that name from a value perspective. But Muguruza was my pick to come out of this quarter.
Yeah, I think that sounds like I was on Rybakina at the French Open. I thought her movement probably was her undoing a little bit in that match with Pavlyuchenkova. But I'm interested to see how she kind of handles Mladenovic first up. I think, as I said before, of the other seeded players, that's another tricky matchup first up for a seed. And one that probably fits in that Shea, Swiatek, and Sabalenka Niculescu group is Siegmund against Alexandrova as another one who's able to, use the slice well, keep it low. It's going to be interesting to see how all of these big hitters handle pretty tricky matchups first up. And I know that Swiatek, there's not a lot to go off, and her second and third sets against Kasatkina last week weren't great, but she did win Wimbledon as a junior, if I recall. So, you know, she's not the worst on the surface, but again, it's hard because we just don't have a lot of form to go off, because last time we were at Wimbledon, I think she was ranked in the 60s or 70s. So a lot's changed in 2 years, and missing that, you know, grass swing last year has made things kind of tricky to gauge.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. Any other thoughts from you on the draw? Are we ready to go to our picks? I guess we are. I didn't have anything else.
Let's go straight into the picks. Who's your ace?
My ace to win the tournament. I went back and forth on this. There was a lot of names. At one point, I wrote a human woman ? And deleted that. Garbina Muguruza. I have to pick somebody. I don't know. I don't feel good about Barty's health. I don't feel good about Swiatek's health. They're probably the two most talented players in the draw. You start to look everywhere else, and there's question marks abound. I think Mahova has a chance, somebody like that. But again, maybe Serena rips through. As I look at Muguruza, I look at her quarter. She's far away from Serena, far away from Ashley Barty, and that third quarter is definitely going to present someone she can defeat. So if Muguruza can find some form here, I think she has a chance to win another Wimbledon title.
Yeah, she's certainly a great chance. Now, I'm going to do Candice's picks in between now, so I don't forget anything as we go along, and if I get distracted. Candice has gone for Coco in this particular draw, so she's kind of taken one to go out of that particularly difficult pocket there, I think, in the second quarter. And I have gone for Petra. Going again. Hopefully she watches her step on the way to her press conferences. And I would much rather lose an outright with the player actually losing a match of tennis instead of finding another way to end up out of the tournament. But I think her price, you know, when you look, the three players above her in the market currently are Serena, Barty, and Sabalenka. You know, Serena and Barty are in the top half. She's got Sabalenka, you know, down in the bottom half with her. But I think, you know, she's shown over the course of her career what she can do on the grass court. She looked solid last week. She got some time on court, and she has a pretty decent draw, I think. I did say that about Roland Garros, and she did end up having to save match point against Minen in the first round as well. So it is kind of, you know, it's not a super confident pick. There are a couple of other players that I'm kind of adding to my selections here, but I think it's a good starting point, I think, looking at that third quarter compared to the strength of some of those other quarters.
I could dig it.
Now, value-wise, where have you ended up?
A bunch of names I listed, but my favorite name is still Elena Rybakina. Again, I know that she doesn't necessarily have the best spot in the draw. That probably goes to Mahova, but I think that her game plays really well here at 25-1. I think she has a chance to avoid a lot of the big names here and get all the way to the final, at which point she'll be very competitive, if not the favorite. So really like Rybakina here at 25-1 or better to lift the trophy.
And Candice has gone for Maria Sakkari to back up her good run there at Roland Garros and make another run here. And, you know, that bigger serve is certainly going to hold her in good stead, I think, this fortnight compared to her previous efforts on grass. My value pick, you may have figured it out as we were kind of talking through in that second quarter. I've gone for Caroline Mahova. I think, as I said, there are 5 names that stand out in particular in that second quarter of the draw. 4 of them are in the other half of the quarter, and Mahova kind of sits there by herself. Her toughest opponent in that, you know, first 4 rounds is Elena Svitolina, who I think she can beat. So I think that's a great spot. Let all the other, you know, players kind of knock themselves out on the way through there. And I think, you know, she's shown she can beat Barty as she did at the Australian Open. She's got the game, I think, that suits the grass, and she's made a deep run in a Grand Slam before. So, you know, she ticks off a fair number of boxes for a player that's around that 40-1 mark at the moment. Moving on to unforced errors, I'll get mine out of the way. It's Bianca Andreescu. I think, look, she is improving, but again, if she loses round 1, I'm not going to hold it against her. I think she is probably one of those ones that maybe it's a case of, you know, if she does lose here early or look not near her best, you know, maybe we start to kind of look at US Open outright prices on her, that she might be able to make a little bit of a push there once she's got a little bit of time under her belt on some familiar courts and, you know, places where she's had success in the past. But she just hasn't shown me enough, I think, to justify her price. And I think a lot of it is on potential, but we just haven't seen it enough recently for me to jump in. Candice has gone for Swiatek as her unforced error. And who have you gone for, Alex?
Miss Ashley Barty, talked about this already. A lot of concerns about her health. We have not seen her play on this surface yet. I am very concerned about her and happy to give her a pass this week for a lot of reasons before you get to her tough draw. So hope everything's well and wrong about this, but I think that we won't see much of her this fortnight.
Yeah. And who is your overvalued player for the tournament?
My overvalued player for the tournament here as I look, Iga Swiatek. I think that if she wasn't Iga Swiatek, she would have the toughest draw in the entire tournament because she is Iga Swiatek. It's probably Petra Martic who has the toughest draw, but my gosh, just an absolute murderer's row of opponent she has to beat just to get out of her quarter. She's already talked a lot about, again, her concerns and apprehension about playing on the surface a little bit. And I think that she struggled a little bit in the French Open, and I wonder if physically playing a full season is starting to get to her a little bit. We'll see, but I think that she is wildly overvalued from an outright pricing perspective.
And I agree with that. And I also agree with Candace's pick, which is Aryna Sabalenka. I think until she proves herself, like she's at the point now where she's starting to prove herself when she reaches a quarterfinal, then she has to prove herself to reach a semifinal, then she has to prove herself by actually winning the final and bringing everything together. I think she's overvalued as well, but I'll be curious to see how she handles. If she handles Niculescu really, really well and plays some really smart tennis, then I might change my mind a little bit. But I think at the moment, looking at the prices, I think she's a little bit overvalued. My overvalued player, though, is Serena Williams. I think a little too much is going off past experience, I guess, and her past form here. And I think you can break it down into two parts here. I think if you're going to support Serena here and you want to back her in some capacity, I would probably back her to make the final as opposed to winning outright. I think she's shown in her most recent finals appearances that pressure seems to get to her, particularly, and also some decent play from the other end of the net, like we saw from Halep in 2019 at Wimbledon. But the nerves are clearly there late in tournaments. So it's one thing for her to get there. It's another thing for her to kind of finish off. And they're question marks we haven't had to deal with for Serena for the better part of her career.
I hope
Alrighty.
So. Again, I won't bet on her. I like great. What do you want her to win? Do you not want her to win? I talked to John and Spread on the Net Worth Pod. John and I are all for another Serena title. We like greatness. Spread, as much as I thought he would advocate for a fellow old person, did not. He's done. He's had enough of the Serena nonsense.
That's interesting because I remember Spread in the past has kind of compared his own game and what he would do if he was Serena. So I'm disappointed to hear that he has jumped off the bandwagon. Look, I don't mind. I'll probably put her in the same bracket as if she wins or if Federer wins. Like, good on them for this stage of their career to be able to kind of push through here. My worry is that there will be a little bit of an asterisk next to it with no Osaka and no Halep. But I think this is her best chance. I think when she lost to Wang, was it last year at the Australian Open? I didn't think that she'd be able to win another one after that. But I think there is every chance this is the last opportunity, I think, for her to be able to, particularly with no Osaka and no Halep in this draw. It's on grass. It's a great spot, but she does have a tough quarter. So it'll be interesting to see how she handles things from probably Kerber onwards. I think their third round onwards is going to get a little bit tricky for her.
Love it.
Alrighty. I think we've wrapped it all up. Where can we find your content for the next fortnight? What are you going to be doing?
Well, at _Noops for most of this stuff. I'll be on Brown Bag Bets daily, but you, myself, and John will be putting together a daily preview podcast. We're calling it Daily Aces. It's a mix of all of our different stuff. One pick per pod, and they're very quick. To call it a podcast is probably stretching out a little bit. They're about 3-4 minutes worth of audio. We try to give you the pick up front. If you don't even want to listen to us talk, that's fine. But we'd appreciate it if you click those. Hopefully it gives you some information, a new format, and a new way to get after it as opposed to following us and just seeing stuff. I'll just post my picks, but hopefully with a little bit of background here and some more information that'll be useful for everybody. So check me out on Twitter at _Noops, and be sure to look for those Daily Aces podcasts at myself, at your Twitter account, which is ace_previews, and then John's Twitter account, which is now at JR Tweets Tennis. And all of my content will be on Twitter at ace_previews. So it'll be through the website, either written or audio through the Daily Aces podcast. But they'll all link the same way. Also have a
mailing list for anything that does go up. That can then be, you can receive an email when I hit publish and posting for all of that. And I'll also have, so the outright previews will be up on the Betfair Hub. I think they might actually be up now. I'm going to go and have a look and post those out, but also a couple of plays a day over there as well. So I've taken the next couple of days off work, so I'm about to rapid fire for the next 7 hours through far too many previews. But that's the fun of it, I think, with particularly these Grand Slams. There's a lot of opportunity. Doesn't mean you have to bet them all, but I think with more matches comes more opportunities to be able to find a little bit of value.
It's going to be really nice. You get to fall asleep to the sound of rain in London, Steve.
Exactly.
Fingers crossed, everybody. Do your no rain dance, whatever you got.
And thanks for everyone who's tuned in live or is listening back to this on the podcast. I think we're on all podcast platforms, so make sure that you do search for it at Eat Sleep Tennis Show. And we will be back. We'll be back sometime soon. I think we'll probably do a little bit of a recap or a little bit of an update across the next fortnight and give a little bit more information there. So thanks again for tuning in. Thanks to those who have liked, subscribed, rated, commented, reviewed. There's too many options now. But thanks for everyone who has tuned in. And we will be back at some time during the fortnight. All the best to everyone if you're having a bet at any point during Wimbledon. And we will be back.